This is my democracy. You won't go telling me my vote don't matter anymore, and is not worth fighting for. This is our democracy. We'll fight to keep it free.
My name is Monied, and I'm an attorney in Denver. I litigated on behalf of citizens who live in the town of Castle Rock, Colorado, two election contests in the years 1998 and 1999, where my citizens were trying to get control of the land use process in Castle Rock. So the 1998 election was an initiative to put a 6-month moratorium in place on land use approvals, and in 1999 my clients mounted a recall election of 6 of the 7 town council members. They show a learning curve on the part of my clients, facing very well-funded and very savvy development interests on the other side. And they also show several ways in which fraud can be committed, particularly with mail ballots. And that's a topic of concern to many communities around the United States, because mail ballots are touted as a convenient method for voting. My position is, and my client's position, and several other activists in the state of Colorado, is that every step you move away from a one-day only polling place election with hand-counted paper ballots, every step away you move from that introduces numerous opportunities for fraud, as you'll see. In 1998, the first thing that happened is that they put this initiative on the ballot. They got all the signatures they needed on petitions, and the petitions were challenged by this man, Rick Ryder, who is an operative who works for real estate developers. His specialty is working elections, and he has several people who work for him. So in this first election, we had to go through a hearing on the protest that he filed, because the clerk had actually found my client's petitions had a sufficient number of signatures to go to election. Ryder challenged them, and we went through a 3-day hearing, long days, at which my key client at the time, who was Carl Alessi, he was a town council member for Castle Rock, he went through and showed that all of the bad signatures that Ryder had flagged were in fact completely valid, and that the errors were due to his own operations, data entry, introducing errors into it. So we went through this 3-day huge hearing and prevailed. So the issue did go on the ballot. But what happened at this special election was that my clients lost. They hadn't known anything about this absentee ballot process, and it was exclusively used by the other side, the development interests, in this election. They were able, meaning my clients were able, to piece together what happened through talking to voters after the fact. The operatives did essentially what's called a push poll in this survey, meaning that they said false things. They weren't just trying to find out voters' proclivities, they said false things about the initiative. We learned that these people then went door to door targeting voters, and they got them to fill out applications for absentee ballots, and then when they learned the ballots were in their possession, having been mailed to the voters by the clerks, they repeatedly went to these people's homes and asked to pick up their ballot. This is a big loophole in Colorado law, which is that voted ballots, absentee ballots and mail ballots, it's legal for some unconnected person to pick them up from the voter for delivery to the clerk. So that's what the operatives were doing. They were conducting a courier service. They would drive around in vans, and one woman told my clients that they were harassing her, and she was a person who was not sympathetic to the developers, whereas her husband had been identified as someone who was. So the operatives got her husband's ballot early on, but they kept pestering her for her ballot, and she said, "Why should I give you my ballot? How do I know you're going to deliver it to the clerk?" In 1999, they mounted this recall effort, 6 of the 7 council members, and I would note I've already mentioned Carl Alessi. He's the only one who was not targeted. The others were all basically cronies of development interests, and that's why my clients wanted to get rid of them. So my clients mounted this recall effort, and from the very beginning they were targeted by the Ryder group, and there could have been other outside interests as well, but targeted in a huge smear campaign. Some of the things that Ryder, well, for one of the, what they did, for instance, they did another push poll, another so-called survey, where they said outright lies about the recall election to the voters they contacted. They told the voters that my clients wanted to get rid of the star on Castle Rock, which is a geological formation that gives the town its name. So they wanted to remove the star from Castle Rock. They wanted to convert the rec center into an adults-only facility, and they wanted to close the library. Complete garbage. They also distributed flyers that were nasty. And one of my clients, Cindy Parker, a very astute, sharp young woman, they did these nasty flyers. So that's the first thing they did, was the big smear campaign. Second thing they did was I actually had to go to court, and I would note I was pro bono. And my payoff, if there was any from this, was learning all the ways in which elections can be co-opted. I mentioned I had to go to court 4 times because of things that the town was doing. And for instance, the town systematically removed my client's campaign signs from the town's rights-of-way, which they had believed were okay for putting signs, but they left their opponents' signs. That's one of the things they did. Another thing was they gave my clients deliberately and knowingly a bad date for the return of the signed petitions so that they could get on the general election ballot for the municipal election that was to be held in 1999. They gave them a date which my clients complied with, and then after my clients complied with it, the attorney for the town, who had given them the date, said, oh no, that date won't work because there has to be time for a protest period to run. And so I had to go to court to get the matter put on the ballot, and by the time we were heard, we couldn't make that municipal election, but the court did give us a new date for a special election, and that was October 26th, 1999. There were 2 other things I had to go to court over, and as I recall, we won on 3 of the 4. I lost on the 4th, and it had to do with a misleading ballot title which the city council had set. So anyway, we finally got the election. After all of this stuff going on, my clients had learned from the previous election about absentee ballots. So this time they decided they would use the absentee ballot themselves. And they campaigned very hard, and they went door to door with applications for absentee ballots. And they got people to get ballots sent to them that way, the same way their opponents were doing. But one thing that's interesting is that the forms were different, and that's permitted under Colorado law. And later when we had our hearing, the clerk for the town, Sally Mazer, testified that she knew which side was using which form, because each one had their own form printed up. This proves to be important later. At any rate, so the election was finally being held, and on election day, October 26th, 1999, I had been at some seminar in the morning, and I came back to my office to a string of frantic calls from my clients about stuff going on. And I ran down to Douglas County, to Castle Rock, because what was going on was the matter with the bogus ballot box on the grounds of the rec center. Tom Valdez was one member of my client group, and he was a candidate for office. In the event one of the council members had been recalled, he would have come in as the replacement candidate. So what he found on this election day was that the operatives had an official ballot box from the county, from Douglas County, that they had been lent by the county clerk. And they had placed this on the grounds of the rec center when the polling place was inside. And this was in violation of statute because absentee ballots on election day were supposed to be delivered to town hall. They couldn't be delivered at the polling place. This is just a requirement of the law. Whether or not, what kind of sense it makes isn't the point. The point is that absentee ballots are a special provision in the law in order to accommodate people who can't make it to the polls on election day. And if they don't comply with the absentee ballot laws, that if they don't get their absentee ballot back in on time, as the statutes require, it means their vote doesn't get counted. That's just the way it's set up. But so this was a way that Sally Mazer, the town clerk, permitted the operatives to cheat. I mean, she never told my clients, for instance, that they could set up a ballot box on the grounds of the rec center.
Hi there.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Who you with down here? You with the city?
Yeah, with Rick.
With Rick?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Who are you with?
I'm with United Castle Rocks. Citizens of Castle Rock. I'm Tom Valdez, one of the candidates.
Oh, that's right.
And I see the 100-foot limit sign there, but our understanding is that the absentee ballots were supposed to be at City Hall, and they're not supposed to be down here.
I'm not sure.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much.
You might want to talk to the guy right behind you.
Okay, thank you. Hi there.
Hi.
Tom Valdez. I was under the impression that city ordinance said that the absentee ballot box was supposed to be at City Hall, not down here at the voter site.
Sally said 100 yards away.
I thought that was for electioneering, not for absentee ballots. I mean, so who's securing the ballots and who's guaranteeing the security on the ballots from here to City Hall?
Don't know. Can't help you.
Don't know, huh? Was the city the one that set this up, or was it the council members? Who set this up?
Can't help you.
Can't help you. All you know is Sally said that it's okay, and they were going to set up. Is there still a box down at City Hall?
I'm not sure.
Okay, well, we'll have to find out. All right, well, thank you very much.
Sure.
The operatives, and this is Scott Lamb, Matt Fitzgerald, and Kelly Schnees, who were working for Rick Ryder, who was being paid by a developer, Lee Alpert. They were again conducting a courier service. They were going around actually taking stuff out of people's mailboxes. They had put door hangers on people's doors telling them, if you haven't gotten your absentee ballot back on time, just call Matt or Scott and they'll come pick them up. And as I've mentioned, it's legal in Colorado to have an absentee ballot, a voter give his or her voted ballot to a third person for delivery to the clerk. But this is another statute we contended was violated by means of this bogus ballot box, in that the delivery here was to a box, which much of the day was unattended, or it was to somebody who then did a handoff to somebody else who then may or may not have taken it to the clerk. So there were violations there too. Scott Lamb drove to the Office of Land Title, which was also involved with the developers, our opponents in this election. And he did a handoff. This bogus ballot box had a lock, the combination to which was only known by the operatives, not even by the town clerk. And so they did a handoff. Matt Fitzgerald opened the box and dumped the ballots on the car seat and got in with his girlfriend apparently and drove off. And so this sort of thing happened a couple times during the day. I got a temporary restraining order on election day from the same good judge who had given us 3 of 4 restraining orders prior to that time, Judge Lawrence of the Douglas County District Court. So he gave us a TRO and he ordered the town clerk to submit the box with the ballots in it to the court immediately.
I'm Tom Valdez, and I'm one of the candidates for the recall. And we were wondering, up till 7 o'clock today, there was supposed to be an absentee ballot box here at City Hall. Is that present today?
Sure is.
Is it, where's it at, ma'am? Oh, you have it right over there? Because we had found out that there was another ballot box down at the rec center.
Who are you with again?
I'm Tom Valdez, one of the candidates for council. I just wanted to verify that that was the box that you guys had up here.
Hi.
Go ahead and help him.
Just have to drop
Great.
this off.
Thank you. Real quick, I need you to fill in Town of Castle Rock.
Okay.
And Douglas County. Then I'll mark your receipt in and I'll have you print it out. Tom, did you get the packet I delivered the
Yes,
other night?
ma'am. In fact, I thanked Sally for that also.
Okay, great. Yeah, I left it with your son and
Yeah, and he said that you did.
great. You can just put it in the box.
Okay. Thank you.
You.
Yeah, what we were wondering about was that the box that's down at the rec center, there's a ballot box down at the rep center, an absentee ballot box. And my understanding, the ordinance said that all absentee ballots during the day of the election was supposed to be here at City Hall and not down at the voter site.
No, actually, there is not a ballot box down there.
What's down there then?
There are absentee ballots down there.
No, but there's a box that I voted in last week, the big box, that's down there 100 foot away from the rec center door. And there's a United Castle Rock person is out there. In fact, Scott's out there, and they're collecting absentee ballots at the rec center, 100 foot away from the door. Now, my understanding is the ordinance says that all absentee ballots are supposed to be brought here until 7 o'clock at night. Any ballots brought there were invalidated. The other question that we had was the fact of the security from that box and those ballots back to City Hall here tonight at 7 o'clock. So,
Come on back, Thomas. He's one of the candidates that's running for council member. And he is concerned, first he thought it was one of our ballot boxes, but I explained it's not one of our ballot boxes. He is concerned that we have a ballot box that is it's on the other side of the 100 feet
Right.
limit sign that was posted, right?
and it's got absentee ballot on it. And my understanding by the city ordinance is that all absentee ballots on the day of the election is supposed to be brought to City Hall.
Actually, there's a statute that says that the voter can designate any person as their agent to bring the ballot into town hall for them.
Right, and my understanding is the intent was that for a family member or a close friend. The other concern was the security of those ballots from that location to City Hall.
Yeah, I don't think it's a good idea just to have this unattended.
Well, no, there's somebody there.
Oh, there is?
But the point being is it's supported by United Castle Rock. And, we're concerned about the validity of those ballots if, from transport to here, who has control over that box.
Yeah, well, but the fact is, if there's a person standing next to the box, then the voter can feel free to give that person their ballot to be taken to town hall. That's what the statute allows.
Okay.
So.
And what about so then the security of the ballots isn't a concern then?
Well, I'm just telling you what the statute allows, and we really have no choice but to follow the statute, so.
And what's the letter of the law then? I mean, the letter and the intent of the law, isn't the intent of the law for a family member or a friend?
The letter of the law is, it is permissible for a voter to deliver the ballot to any person of the voter's own choice.
Okay. Okay, voter's own choice.
Correct.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much for clarifying that for me.
Alrighty, thanks.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you, bye.
It's nothing, they're trying to find an excuse. They're gonna lose. It's that simple.
So you got notified by phone that we had the restraining order then? Is that why you left the site? Okay.
And I was
Understand
told
that.
the restraining order told me to bring it down here and have them keep it separate.
Okay, that's fine.
You want to videotape this?
Yeah.
Okay, and go ahead and mark those received.
Okay.
And
And it's very important that you
Put it
keep
in
those
this box.
separate. Yeah.
Well, Yeah, the idea behind the whole thing is that represents a city ballot box.
That's not correct.
And this morning at 10:30, it was represented as such.
That's because you sideswiped a young girl about it.
All I did was
That's
ask her
not
who
fair.
she was with. I asked her
said
who she was with.
Rick. Does that sound like the city to you?
I
That's
asked her.
not the city.
I asked her. I said, "Are you with the city?" And she
I think
said,
it's very
"Yes."
unfair that
With
you
Rick.
take a volunteer and you sideswipe a volunteer and hold an entire campaign to a girl you
No,
sideswipe.
no, because I talked to Scott, and Scott had told. In fact, Scott wouldn't answer any questions concerning the box. And
Because it's irrelevant to you. If they give us permission to bring their ballots down, then we can do that. We're not representatives of the city. We are not portraying ourselves as representatives of the city.
Okay, but our attorney had said that, well, if it was just a regular box, a cat box, or any other box besides an official ballot box, then, voters can be
That's irrelevant.
mistaken.
It's if you tell them it's fine, and we tell them each and every time.
Okay. That's fine. I mean, we're just doing our part.
I understand. You guys are nervous.
No, I don't think we're as much nervous as we want to make sure that that this is done right.
I'm sorry, Matthew, what's your last name?
Fitzgerald.
F-I-T-Z-G-E-R-A-L-D.
I'm sorry if I sound upset, but I'm
No,
a little annoyed
I
that the girl got
understand.
sideswiped. She's a young girl.
Okay.
It's unfair.
Hello? I'm down here at the town hall with the guy with the ballot box.
Town of Castle Rock, how may I direct your call?
He took it straight here. He
That's
was
okay.
he got a
Bye-bye.
phone call that the restraining order had been issued, and he came straight here with it.
And we got that TRO right around the time the polls closed, around 7 p.m. on Election Day. And Sally Mazzara did not turn that box over for 24 hours, so she violated the court order. My clients, after we lost at the election, and I'm sorry I didn't review the margin by which they lost, but they lost by another big margin. So then they decided to go through the election materials in the clerk's office. And while they were doing that, all the election materials were transferred from the clerk's office to their attorneys in Glendale, which is 20 miles away. And my clients, the ones who were reviewing the records, were the mothers of small children and so forth, and so that was inconvenient for them. And also with those election materials spirited away to attorneys' offices, it meant other things could happen. So I got yet another order from the district court judge, Judge Lawrence. He agreed that the Open Records Act had been violated by this move, and he not only ordered that the election records be returned to Castle Rock, but he ordered the other side to pay our attorney fees. So we had the matter set for hearing, and since I've just been mentioning Judge Lawrence, I'll go ahead and say what happened here. 10 days before our hearing, Judge Lawrence was suddenly rushed into emergency surgery, and they took out his voice box and part of his tongue. And he never returned to the bench, and he died, I think, the next year. So our good judge was suddenly not there anymore. And in fact, we waited a long time for another judge. And in the meantime, the council members whose recall success we were challenging in court were sworn into office for another term and all the rest of it. And I actually had to threaten to sue state judicial to get a judge. So we finally did, and ended up with a very different kind of judge, one who ultimately didn't find very much of a problem with what had happened in the town. And now I'll tell you some of the things that happened. My clients, for instance, in going through the absentee ballots, they discovered that the return envelopes that Sally Mazzara, the town clerk, had used to send absentee ballots to voters who had applied on our opponent's form all had a white label pasted on the front. Whereas the ballots, the absentee ballot return envelopes that were sent in response to my clients' applications did not have that white label. So right there was a way of distinguishing the ballots that came back. And Sally Mazzara admitted under oath at our hearing that she knew which side was using which form. Also, my clients, because they were using this absentee ballot device, just as they'd learned from their clients, or excuse me, from their opponents the previous year, my clients said that they were busily handing out applications for absentee ballots well up till right before the election, which was permitted by law. But Sally Mazzara's records, showed no receipt of any absentee ballots on my client's form after that date that was 10 days before the election, even though my clients said they were busily handing them out and people were interested. So, no records. Also, we had two witnesses, people who testified that they had sent their absentee ballot application into the clerk and received no ballot back. And in those cases, too, Sally Mazzara, this is my recollection, yes, Sally Mazzara said, or her records did not show the receipt of these applications, although these people testified they had sent them in. So, Here's what must have been happening, is that she was throwing my clients' applications for absentee ballots away and not recording the receipt of them in violation of law. Other things that happened are that she recorded as having been received by mail a series of 10 or 12 ballots that had stamps but no postmarks. So she obviously did not receive those by mail. That was another false record. We introduced into evidence the absentee ballot return envelope of Ray Highland. When my clients were going through the election records, they found this envelope which had no postmark and the stamp was not canceled. And yet the clerk marked that one too as having been received by mail. So because my clients had found this, I put this specifically, again, in our complaint in the election contest. At the time of the hearing then, all of a sudden, the original, we put the copy that we had into evidence, and then the original appeared, and all of a sudden there was a cancellation through the stamp and a postmark. And the postmark was different, and the cancellation, from every other one in the whole election. All the other postmarks were wavy lines put on by the downtown Denver post office. This one had straight lines through it. So it was another forged thing, and in fact it was probably a violation of federal law. Also, the statutes require that if people, or that with the absentee ballots, that the clerk is required to note on each of the return envelopes the manner of delivery, the manner of receipt that is, and if someone brought it in, the name and address of the person making the delivery, as well as the date and hour of delivery. And Sally Mazer kept a number of false records in that regard too, because she wouldn't say name and address of the person making the delivery. And many of them, if not most of them, were recorded as having been received at 8 a.m. on election day, which isn't possible because, she said she received them by mail. The mail didn't even arrive till later. So it meant that she was somehow receiving them at night. But at any rate, she used a very inconsistent method of designating how she had received these ballots. Instead of saying the name and address of the person who delivered it, she would say dropped off, dropped in, dropped off by spouse, that sort of thing. So there was no record. We knew that the operatives, the writer operatives, actually had ballots in their possession. We had testimony about this too. One one voter testified that young men who said they had worked, or that they worked for the clerk's office in Castle Rock, showed up at her and her husband's door with ballots, and they voted them and mailed them back. But it turns out no young men work for the clerk's office, or did, in Castle Rock. The young men worked for Rick Ryder, so it was probably Matt and Scott. At any rate, what apparently occurred was a communication between this voter and her husband and the operatives, some kind of communication, or maybe between them and the clerk. But although she testified that she had voted her ballot, she and her husband both, it was never recorded as received by the town clerk. And these witnesses were this witness, Alice Sanders, was 75 years old, so it appears that the judge did not accept her testimony, although it was completely lucid, and she knew that she had voted. She didn't just fill out an application. Also, there were numerous duplicate stubs. There were numbered stubs on the ballots. We could never figure this out, but there were several stubs. My clients fanned them out and we made Xeroxes of them. We couldn't understand why they had duplicate numbers. Well, one explanation may have been that it was a bunch of bogus ballots that were printed up by the operatives, and so they weren't keeping track that the numbers were even distinct from the numbers of bona fide ballots in the clerk's possession. Sally permitted the operatives to function as watchers, and she never required them to file certificates as watchers. And we got an admission that they were actually writing down ballot numbers. But watchers are there to write down voters' names as they're called out, because the whole point is they can do a get out the vote effort and pick up people who haven't voted yet. But with ballot numbers, what that means is they can fill out their own ballots, which they had, and submit those, vote them on behalf of voters. We believe that large-scale forgeries went on in this election, and we actually had testimony as to some of them. we hired a handwriting expert, which is to say my clients did. He was a forensics document examiner for the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Department for 25 years, now in his own practice as a handwriting analyst. So my clients hired him, but because his rates were high, they only had him check ballots, meaning the ballot return envelopes, which have the self-affirmation. They only had him check those envelopes and applications that they believed through their own analysis were inconsistent, were signed by somebody different from the registration records where the signatures are on file. So they only had this guy Bradley check 12 of them, and several of those he did testify, in his opinion, they were forgeries. In fact, 2 of the applications or ballots that the handwriting expert said were forged were by Kelly Niblack and Bridget Niblack. And as to both of them, he said their signatures were the same as that of their mother, Mary Ann Niblack. And these 2, Kelly and Bridget, were of college age. They obviously never even saw their ballots. At least that's the conclusion you have to draw. And then Mary Ann Niblack and her husband both appeared on a big advertisement that our opponents took out, urging people to vote against the recall. So they obviously had ties to the developer community. So of the 12 ballots or applications that my clients had Andrew Bradley examine, he did come up with several forgeries. But it is very possible that there were many, many more forgeries than we were able to uncover, because if the signature was identical, my clients wouldn't have flagged it, and the signatures could very well be identical. There's such a thing as a bank rapidograph. It's an old-fashioned thing that has a stylus on one end and a pen on the other, and it permits you to perfectly trace a signature. Also, with optical scanning devices, forgeries are pretty easy to come by. Really, their handwriting analysis isn't a science, it's a black art for the most part. There are certain things Andrew Bradley could discover if he's looking at originals. For instance, you can see whether the fibers in a piece of paper are bent the same way or with the same force. You can do certain tests like that, which he didn't do in our case because the original registration records with people's signatures were not available. All we had were copies. Now, my clients had heard that what the operatives were doing was having voters sign petitions to retain this or that council member in office. And I was never able to recover the petitions despite all kinds of discovery requests. But Scott Lamb in his deposition didn't refer to them as petitions. He referred to them as signature cards. And so, in fact, from the election materials from the polling place, there was a big stack of signature cards, obviously, from voters who came in to vote, and none of them had the indicia required by law, meaning saying with printed information that this is an election in the town of Castle Rock and other required information. They were instead completely generic signature cards. So it would have been very easy to obtain original signatures of voters and just turn those signature cards in and vote on these people's behalf. We don't know for sure that that's what was done, but it's a possibility. And also, there's something else, something maybe even more sinister, which is that when signatures are collected in this fashion, and then if there were petitions that were never went anywhere, they do look original. They're not identical to the ones that are on file in any public office anywhere. Sally Mazer permitted our opponents to use the town's utility payments drop box as a ballot box, as a box into which both they could put applications for absentee ballots as well as the voted ballots. But she never told my clients that they could use the utility payments drop box. And of all the things that Sally did in this election, that's the only thing that the judge agreed with us on. But the problem is, under the Municipal Election Code, that you have to show that fraud was created or that illegal ballots were received or legal ballots were rejected in a number sufficient to change the outcome of the election. And that's a virtually impossible task, so we didn't prevail. At least in Colorado, and I'm sure elsewhere, when you apply for an absentee ballot, you can ask that the ballot be sent to an address which, in fact, has no relationship to the address at which you're registered to vote. So anyone can apply for a ballot on your behalf, have the ballot sent to Dillon, Colorado, if you live in Castle Rock, vote it and send it back, and you're never the wiser. Unless if you show up and you try to vote, and then they might tell you, oh, you can't vote because you've already voted. Or maybe they say, oh, there's some problem here. Why don't you fill out a provisional ballot so that you forget that there was a glitch? But it is another way that fraud can be accomplished. The voter can be completely out of the loop with mail ballots. Another point that distinguishes mail ballots from polling place elections is that there is a division of labor at the polling place. There aren't that many functions ascribed to the clerk, who you must remember is a partisan official. And in fact, at the polling place, all the responsibilities, most of them for the election, are divided among volunteers, election judges. And they're the ones, for instance, who have custody of the ballots the night before the election. They're the ones who turn the ballot box upside down before the polls open and make sure there aren't any ballots inside. They're the ones who do the counting, and they run the whole election. The clerk has very few responsibilities. She orders the ballots. That's really what it comes to. So that's another big distinction between a polling place election and mail ballots. In mail ballots, the ballots are received back, and the clerk is in charge of everything for a long period of time up before the election. And counting even takes place before the election. There aren't any watchers. There's nobody keeping an eye on her. And as mentioned, she's a partisan official. So this is something that is a huge loophole. If you have, if you've got volunteers at the polling place during election day, you have a much greater sense of security and assurance that the voters' intentions and their actual ballots that they voted are what are being counted. Other things that mail balloting or absentee balloting permits, which doesn't happen in the polling place, is personal communication with the clerk. We had instances where voters called in a panic and told the clerk, gosh, I really don't support this recall election, and yet I haven't sent my absentee ballot back yet. I'm afraid it's not going to get to the town hall in time. What can I do? In these cases, the clerk made sure that these people were able to vote. She let them vote twice. She let them vote a second time. In one instance, she sent her deputy out to the voters' houses when they were elderly and said they couldn't get to the mailbox. And Janet Turbett went out there with ballots, let them vote them in her presence, and then carried them back. And for sure they did this because the voters had expressed their sympathies to the clerk. This obviously doesn't happen in the polling place on election day. In fact, it's criminal conduct. It's called electioneering. You're not supposed to mention a candidate's name when you're in the line at the polling place. This is another huge loophole. In mail balloting, all kinds of conduct is permitted, which is criminal at the polling place. Electioneering was going on between the operatives driving door to door and getting people to give their voted ballots to them. They were telling people how to vote. They were encouraging them how to vote. So one other point about the mail ballots, which makes them outrageous, is that this idea of a self-affirmation where you're signing your name on the ballot, what that is it's an identification of the ballot itself, because there it is with the envelope. And even though the ballot's not signed, it's in the signed envelope. The main thing is it's a violation of the constitutional guarantee of privacy in the ballot, because there's your name on it, which is another thing that's criminal. There's not supposed to be any identifying information. So we've hit on some important points here about why mail ballots should not be tolerated in our society. It completely abrogates the idea of a confidential vote and of a secure, free, and fair election. Because in the polling place, everything is accounted for. Every single ballot is accounted for. Another point is that when the mail is involved, you don't know who or if a fraud has been committed. We don't know the chain of custody of people. We don't know if what you put in the mail is the same thing that's opened in the clerk's office, if indeed it is opened. Here's another interesting coda on this whole thing, is that after the election, and after we lost in our election challenge in the court, when the judge was switched on us, I filed a 26-page affidavit with the district attorney for Douglas County, detailing hundreds possibly thousands, but at least hundreds of offenses under the election laws and documenting all of them. And the district attorney's people informed me that they were working on it. I would call and say, how are you doing? I was surprised that they hadn't called me in to talk to them about it or walk them through the materials we had, and they never did. But they just said, oh, we're working on it, don't worry. And then they let the statute of limitations expire so that no criminal charges were ever brought. We also had no success with the Secretary of State or with the Attorney General. I ran as the Green Party Attorney General candidate for Colorado in 2002, largely because of the election fraud. And I talked about it wherever I could, but I was excluded usually. So why are we tolerating this? We should not be. We need to return to a one-day only polling place election in this country. And despite my trying to get the word out about this, and my clients trying to get the word out about this, we've never had any press on this subject at all. The Rocky Mountain News and the Denver Post had reporters present for one day each of our hearing, and then they did stories only on the amount of money that the election contest was costing the town. And in fact, the town shouldn't have been paying anything because it was a recall against each of these council members, but the town was in there defending them. But hopefully, at least with the detail I've gone into, people elsewhere can see some ways in which fraud is committed in elections, in mail ballots. My email address is dinophile@gmail.com. That's DINOPHILE @gmail.com.
This is my democracy. You won't go telling me my vote don't matter anymore, and it's not worth fighting for. This is our democracy. We'll fight to keep it